Namespace, they are used to organize our code and to group it very well. This helps us to avoid name collisions. For an example, let's just have an imaginary import module. That import module, we import module, another module, which has this cout function. How are we going to differentiate between the cout from IO stream and the cout from our imaginary import? That will be difficult without the namespaces. In this case, we are saying cout, you are from namespace std, which is from IO stream. STD, remember we said it stands for standard. Should you not want to type and to make it your code to be easily readable, you can omit STD, but first C++ allow you to do this. What we have just done here by just typing this keyword using, we have brought the entire namespace into our current scope, meaning that in this file we can just, every time when we need cout, we can just do the following. Every time when we need end line, we can do the following. So we'll never get an error because we have just brought the whole namespace. Our compiler understands that cout is from this namespace, and this namespace, it is found under this IO stream module. Let us continue. We are going to discuss types. C++ has many types, but for simplicity, we are going to only focus on int type. Type int is an integer type. Is a whole number storing negative and positive number. It is a whole number storing positive and negative number. That's int. It is an integer. It's an integer. Integer is a whole number storing negative and positive numbers. Then next, we have used a single line comment here. Remember, comments, they are just notes or they explain code within our program, but for human only, for another program, of to remind yourself later on when you come back to this application. They are being ignored by a compiler. They are not changed into machine language. This is for humans only. Now we are going to discuss a variable. A variable is a named piece of memory. A variable is a named piece of memory. And you declare a variable by first telling us the type, then giving it a name. You say a type and giving it a name. Since we are only discussing integer, we are going to create a variable of type int and we'll give it a name salary. Then we have just declared a variable of type, we declared a piece of memory of type, we have requested a piece of memory of type integer, and we have renamed it salary so that we can refer to this memory later on into our program. Now we are going to initialize it or give it a value or store value in this memory and it expects us to only store integer value, which are whole numbers. In this case, I will store 200. Close my statement. One thing that you need to remember when dealing with names, it's either you give name to a variable, or you give name to a function, or you give name to a namespace, you give name to a class, you give name to a struct. In C++, you need to remember or keep note of the following. I will use multi-line comments. Comments are ignored by a compiler. So these are the things that you need to know. You can use upper or lower case sequence. When giving your variables, function, namespace, classes, you can use the sequence of uppercase, and we can test this by just doing like this. This is acceptable. Number two, we can also use digits. Digits between 0 and 9, we can also do that by saying 9. This is still acceptable. We can also use underscore. This is also acceptable. One thing you need to remember, names only begin with a letter or underscore. So names can only begin with a letter or underscore. For an example, this is acceptable, and also, as we can see, by just using a letter, it is acceptable. But what if I pass a digit 1, we get an error? What if I pass digit 9, we get an error? 0, we get an error. So this is not accepted. Again, we need to remember that a name must not have a space in between. This is not accepted. We cannot have a space between name. Again, we need to know just a name that names are case. Come on, if I can type. Name are case sensitive, then this means int salary, and I assign it -50. I've declared another piece of memory of type integer, but this time I've started it with a cap S, and this is different from that. Even when for us human, this is the same thing, but in terms of C++ compiler, these are two different things, and we can test it by just extending our statement here into multiple lines for readability, and we can pass the first one salary, and we can also pass the second salary, into our buffer, And let's fix it here as well. Salary. So what we are simply saying here is that every time when this word salary in this our scope, you replace it with -50, and when you see again this keyword salary, you also replace it with 200. So we are just showing here in memory that we are not overwriting this one because these are two different memory. Let's test our code. And this is the result. We have -50 and we also have 200. Also have 200 if we can make space here, and if also we can just put colon, and let's test again. 50, 200. Next time we will do calculations based on integer, where we will be able to multiply, to divide integers minus integers like that, to increase or replace what is inside the following memory. See you shortly.